Okay, that's a bad start. Okay, can you all hear me okay? All right, thank you for being here. Good evening. Welcome to the Central Pennsylvania World War II Roundtable and our speaker tonight and our previous speakers, some in the room today. Again, just welcome to everyone. Thank you for being here. Quick reminder, housekeeping, could you please silence your cell phones at this time? And as you're silencing your cell phone, reminder, we do have our helmet committee right outside the door. We have bathroom facilities right out here, and we'll get moving. My name is Steph Chortnoff. I'm a director in the Central Pennsylvania World War II Roundtable. Happy to take over the duties tonight for our Vice President, Jeff Patton, who cannot be here at this time. Could we all stand, if able, to conduct the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. The Central Pennsylvania World War II Roundtable is a nonprofit organization, and we provide a forum for World War II veterans, authors, historians, citizens, my students over the years, to share their knowledge, share their passion and interest in the Second World War. And so that is our commitment. And again, we're hosting a variety of speakers here at Grace Church, and we are grateful for this opportunity for these facilities. At this time, if we have any World War II veterans in the audience, could you please stand or raise your hand? Any World War II veterans? Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. We wouldn't be here without you. At this time, we'd also like to recognize any veterans, any service members here in the audience. And if you're here, could you please stand? Thank you very much for your service and dedication to our country and being here in attendance. We wouldn't be here without you either. Again, as a nonprofit, it is a mom and pop organization. We exist on a thin margin. So we do have our helmet committee tonight collecting at the doors in an authentic World War II helmet. Any contribution you could make at this time or mailed in, we would appreciate that. We do have various costs. We're all volunteers, and we'd love to see our organization continue to thrive. We do have our books for sale out there as well, mugs, various things that'll be available throughout the meeting and after. Okay, there's 3 events I'd like to highlight that happened today, or May 1st, during World War II. Then I'll talk about upcoming events and our current speaker. Today, May 1st, 1944, the Yugoslav partisans, under the leadership of Tito, a delegation arrived in London, England, to plead their case with various Allied leaders to cooperate and get some formal recognition. So that happened today, May 1st, 1944. Exactly 1 year later, May 1st, 1945, the U.S. 15th Air Force conducted its final bombing mission in Italy as part of the roundup and the closure of the offensives against the occupying Nazis and German military. May 1st, 1945, in Berlin, in a bunker, Joseph Goebbels, one of Adolf Hitler's henchmen and right-hand man, killed himself, his wife, and his 6 children in the bunker via poison. On to happier topics. We have a few upcoming events with some partner groups that we have. The Harrisburg Civil War Roundtable meets at the Central Penn College May 16th. It's a Friday night. There's a dinner option, and the speaker is Harold Holzer, who's making an appearance from New York City. His lecture will be on Abraham Lincoln and the American immigration policy during his time. This is the annual Nye Summers Lecture. It is a major closing event for the Harrisburg Civil War Roundtable, and you are all welcome to attend. And you could find more information on their website or see Steve Smith right over there with his hand up. May 24th and 25th, Memorial Day weekend at the Harrisburg International Airport down in Middletown. We want to acknowledge that there are the Blue Angels are going to perform. There's a P-51 Mustang that will be there for what is now the return of hopefully an annual air show, again at the Harrisburg International Airport, May 24th to 25th. Okay, the final event we want to highlight is World War II weekend. I forget how many years it's been, somebody help me out, but nearly 34 years at the Mid-Atlantic Air Museum in Reading. Tremendous opportunity, air show, veterans, historians, reenactors. It is a great event, and we want to highlight that. World War II weekend is May 6th, 7th, and 8th at the Mid-Atlantic Air Museum. Did I say May? I'm sorry, June. And I apologize to my daughter, whose birthday is June 7th, and that's wrong month. On to our current speaker, John Cappello. To my right here is a historian and U.S. Air Force veteran, and he will be speaking here as soon as I'm done making mistakes. John details the account of one of World War II's most daring rescues of nearly 500 American and Allied airmen who had been stranded in Yugoslavia. Many of those men for over a year. Serbian civilians risked everything to prevent the Germans from capturing these airmen, tending to their injuries, sharing what little food they could spare, and moving them from village to village. Our speaker, John Cappello, is a 25-year U.S. Air Force veteran who served as an Air Force attaché in the U.S. embassies in Belgrade, Serbia, and Tel Aviv, Israel. A command pilot with over 3,000 flying hours, he has extensive experience in military aviation and international relation. He is the founder of the Halyard Mission Foundation, established in 2015. Let's have a great warm welcome to John Cappello.
I'm on, right? Yes. Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you all for being here this evening. It's an honor to be among not just the veterans, but especially having a World War II veteran with us this evening. And I'll share a little bit more about the fact that I was so lucky to have met a number of the airmen that were rescued during this mission. And that's the big impetus for me standing here today. Thank you very much to the roundtable for inviting me. Chris, thanks for your coordination and making this happen. It wasn't such a bad drive from DC to get here. Although you leave just a half-hour difference, it makes like an hour and a half difference in the drive. So I screwed that one up. Usually I start this presentation by giving a little quiz. I'm going to show two photographs, and then I'll ask by a show of hands. I think we'll have more recognition from this group than many others that I speak with. But I'll ask by a show of hands, who knows who this gentleman is? Okay, a couple of hands. Most people do not know who this is. How about this gentleman here? Okay, usually more people do, and as a matter of fact, he was in the recognition, right? Or in the introduction. So that's right. That's Joseph Broz Tito. He became the ruler of Yugoslavia after the Second World War. And there's a reason why we know more people know who he is than know who he is. And this is General Draža Mihajlović. Because at the end of the Second World War, Tito executed General Mihajlović, who was actually responsible for the Operation Halyard, for the mission that we're going to talk about, and the rescue of the American airmen. I hope by the end of this conversation, by the end of this presentation, you'll understand a little more why we should know who this is and why it's important. What he did was so important and should be recognized. So I'm going to start by showing you a short 3-4 minute video about the rescue mission, gives you kind of an overview and just a little bit about what we do as a foundation.
In the whirlwind of World War II, a large number of American servicemen found themselves behind enemy lines. Many failed to escape capture. Yet some, thanks to the great sacrifices of local patriots, were successfully hidden. The story of the rescue mission, codenamed Halyard, takes us back to 1944, to the war-torn kingdom of Yugoslavia, which was under brutal Nazi occupation. Approximately 500 American and Allied airmen, under a complete veil of secrecy, in close proximity to nearby German garrisons, hid for months throughout the Šumadija region in central Serbia, before making their way to the small village of Pranjani. When the opportune moment came, members of the Yugoslav army in the homeland under the command of General Dragoljub Mihailović, the local population, and the Office of Strategic Services conducted the largest and most successful rescue mission of American airmen from behind enemy lines. President Harry Truman awarded General Mihailović the Legion of Merit, the highest military decoration that can be presented to a foreign official for the essential role he played in the mission. This operation is considered as one of the most important conducted by the Office of Strategic Services, the predecessor to Central Intelligence Agency, and the U.S. Special Operations Command. Due to complex political and ideological reasons during the Cold War, this mission remained hidden from the public eye for over half a century. In 2007, after our first visit to the field where the rescue operation took place and meeting villagers who saved the American airmen, our mission was clear: to find a way to tell this story. Over the next 8 years, we were focused on developing a culture of remembrance. This included holding commemoration ceremonies, exhibits, and lectures. Also, we have been collecting historic materials and testimonies from American and Serbian veterans of the mission. In 2015, the endeavor was transformed into the Halyard Mission Foundation, and over the next 6 years, our activities have expanded significantly. Our goal remains the same: to pay tribute to the participants of the Halyard mission, to raise public awareness, and to engage with Serbian and American communities. That way, we contribute to deepening relations between our two countries and remembering the greatest generation who fought for freedom and democracy. One way to remember is to walk the footsteps of the airmen that landed in Serbia. We are developing a historic trail that marks areas of the mission's significance and allows us to travel where our forefathers did as they traversed Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. We also continue to organize exhibitions and support local communities. But above all, we are working to find and connect all the families of American airmen and their rescuers in Serbia, thus acknowledging their heroic efforts as well as strengthening U.S.-Serbian relations. All these combined goals are perhaps best reflected in the successful establishment of the Halyard Foundation Memorial on Galavica Field, just outside the village of Pranjani in central Serbia. The complex was opened in September 2020 with great support from the Serbian government. Today, it is the focal point of the descendants of World War II heroes, members of local communities, Serbian and American officials, and friends and supporters of the foundation from around the world, all gathered to pay tribute. And remember.
The Halyard Mission Foundation remains committed to telling the story of this amazing rescue operation and the important role Serbs played in its success. We invite you to join us in honoring the history that strengthens the relations between our two countries and epitomizes the shared values of our two proud nations. So that gives you a little idea, for those of you who don't know much about the mission, just a little bit about the mission, and then what we're trying to do as a foundation. But before I get into more of the details of the mission, I think it's important to answer the question why I'm standing here today in front of you to talk about a rescue mission that occurred during World War II. And for me, so I'm from New York originally. I was born in the Bronx. I ended up going to the Air Force Academy, graduated, went to pilot training in Texas, and flew for the majority of my career, but ended up serving in Serbia at the United States Embassy there as a defense and air attaché. And the journey for me started when I first showed up to Serbia in 2007. It was literally the first week I was there. I was approached by two Serb producers, and they were looking for archival footage from World War II, from United States Army Air Forces, about the Ploesti raids, about the 15th Air Force raids against the Ploesti oil fields. And I asked them, I had no problem helping them. I could reach back to the United States Air Force and find that footage. But I asked them, well, what did you want that footage for? And so they told me they were doing this little documentary about a rescue mission. And I asked them, what rescue mission are you talking about? And they explained a little bit more about how during the Second World War, Serbs were responsible, helped rescue over 500 American airmen in Operation Halyard. And again, I was a little embarrassed. I understood the history surrounding it. As an airman, it was part of my heritage. I knew when 15th Air Force established the bomber bases, we used those bases in southern Italy to bomb targets throughout Southeast Europe. The Ploesti oil fields in Romania were one of the most important targets. And I knew that. I knew the history surrounding this. But I was a little embarrassed that I didn't know about this rescue mission. So I told them, of course, I'm happy to help. I can get you that footage, but under one condition, that you bring me to this place, right, this airfield that they built, and show me where this rescue mission took place. So a few weeks later, it was, I guess, a month or two later, we drove down. So it was about a 3-hour trip from Belgrade to the part of Serbia where this was, before the new highways built. So single lane road, driving all the way down, about 3 hours, no air conditioning, windows rolled down. And my expectation was that we'd get there, I'd see an old potato field, we'd meet a farmer, a villager, and they would give me a shot of rakia, which they make, right? This is what happens when you go to the village. But when I arrived in the town, this is a photo from that day. This is what I saw. There was a Serbian flag, an American flag, and there were probably 50 villagers out there to greet me. So it was very clear right away to me how important this story was to them, but it was important to me as well. Not just because I was a pilot and airman, but because I was an American and what they did to save American airmen, and that we didn't know this story. And so that was the beginning of the journey for me. I mean, I believe this story is important on so many levels. If you look at it from a purely military history perspective, it was total success behind enemy lines, close to a German garrison, without a single loss, without being detected. an amazing, amazing story. 500 airmen extricated over a 4-month period. But if you drill down, you start to look at the stories of the individuals, right? The airmen that got into those aircraft every single day, knowing how tremendous the odds are against them, right? And we'll talk a little bit about that. Then you drill down more to the Serbs, the Yugoslav army in the homeland, the Royal Army that was fighting against a brutal, brutal German occupation. I visited a town in Kragujevac. There's a monument to 3,000 people that were slaughtered in one day in retribution by the Germans. So the German occupation there was brutal. And the Yugoslav army was fighting that against great odds. And then the Yugoslav people. This was a rural Serbia during the Second World War. These airmen were not in the Holiday Inn, right? They were being protected by individuals who, if they were caught, the Germans were racing after these airmen, so if they were caught, for sure they would be killed, maybe their family, probably their villages. So it's an amazing story. It's a story of courage, of honor, of tremendous sacrifice, and for me, it's something that we should understand and know a little bit more about. So just, I don't have to go into too much background probably with this group, just to give you some context here. Here's Europe, of course, during World War II. You know where Italy is, and then Yugoslavia right here. Okay, we drill down just a little bit more. Again, whoops. So we all know that the 15th Air Force established the bomber bases, the Foggia Bomber Complex around Bari, Brindisi. Here's Palesti, the field. So if you look at the route of flight, right, it took you right over Yugoslavia. Of course, there were many other targets throughout Southeast Europe that we'll look at as well. And then, again, just a little more context, we drill in and we see how many of the bases surrounded Bari, Brindisi for 15th Air Force. I like to show this because a lot of people don't understand how complex the air war over Europe was during the Second World War. Of course, the top chart shows 8th Air Force flying out of Great Britain, England, prosecuting targets in Northern Europe, where 15th Air Force was flying in Southeast Europe. And this, unfortunately, not very clear slide shows a lot of the targets that they were flying against. And again, some of the most important targets were in Romania, the oil fields, because those oil fields provided over 33% of the German oil and lubricants. So they were very heavily defended and very important targets for the Allies. We sent many, many missions against those targets and incurred tremendous losses. I like to talk a little bit more about the air war in Europe and in the Balkans. People don't understand the scope. I mean, we put some numbers to it. It's still hard to fathom. 15th Air Force lost over 3,200 aircraft. 3,200 aircraft. 21,000 airmen were either killed, missing, POWs, or captured. 21,000 airmen, right? 8th Air Force, you probably know this statistic as well. 8th Air Force lost more airmen over Northern Europe than all the Marines throughout the Pacific. And that takes nothing away from what the Marines faced, right? It just puts into context how brutal the air war was over Europe. And this helps to put it into context also. This was against a target in Czechoslovakia on August 25th, 1944. Because a lot of people don't understand. Okay, so you had the fighters, people understand that, but in a B-17 or a B-24, I often ask how many airmen were in each aircraft? I mean, I know you all know, right? 10 airmen in each aircraft. So each aircraft that was lost, that's 10 airmen either captured, killed, or somehow looking how to get home. fight against the German capabilities in Romania was intense and was flown a few times, first out of Africa, and then Operation Torch, and then the second time out of Italy, with tremendous losses. There were over 1,800 airmen captured over the target, actually. And this is a photo it still gives me a shivers when I see a wing falling off an airplane like that. But what I shared with you here is kind of big picture and numbers, right? We talk about these numbers, and it's very hard to understand that level of loss. But this puts it, I hope, into a little more perspective. This is the situation of one individual. This was one guy. Multiply this by a couple thousand. So this was Roberts. He was shot down in the Boer area, and he had to make his way. So part of his crew was rescued by the Royalist forces. Another part was actually captured by Germans. And so they made their way from Boer, by foot to the surrounding area around Progny, where they were housed for. In their case, they were shot down early, so they were there almost 2.5 months, waiting for the rescue to be planned, and then from Progny, rescued back to Italy. So again, this kind of gives you an idea of the missions and the reason why these airmen ended up there. The Serbian population was really pro-Allied from the onset. If you know anything about the history of Yugoslavia, you know that Yugoslavia was a monarchy before the war. When the Germans invaded, they defeated the Yugoslav Royal Army pretty quickly. It was disbanded. Initially, they caved into the Germans, but there was a small coup. Prince Peter was overthrown. I'm sorry, Prince Paul was overthrown. Prince Peter became the leader of the government. They ended up leaving, going to Greece. But part of the Yugoslav Royal Army that wasn't defeated and captured and sent to prison camps went into the hills. And the main individual, General Draža Mihailović, he was a colonel at the time, he took a group of his officers, some of his NCOs, and went up into the hills and formed a resistance movement. This resistance movement actually was one of, if not the first, resistance movements in Europe, and it was recognized as such in the United States, in our popular culture. This is a cover of Time magazine from May of 1943, and he was recognized here as causing a tremendous amount of difficulty for the Germans in occupied Yugoslavia and in Balkans. And there's a few. This is an actual photo of the general. There were some other magazines. Comics were made. There was actually a movie, The Fighting Chetniks, that was produced. I think this was in late 1943 as well. And so there was a recognition, and there was support given to his movement. The Chetniks, it means guerrilla fighter, and traditionally it goes back to the Serbs' revolt against the Ottomans during the Ottoman Empire. And so Chetniks is just the local voivodas, the local sheriffs, if you will, had groups that they would fight against the occupation. So General Mihailović, his resistance forces were officially known as the Yugoslav Army in the homeland, but nominally known as the Chetnik forces. Now, General Mihailovich didn't control everyone didn't command everyone that called themselves Chetniks, but he did command a significant portion of them. And up until Tehran in 1943, most of the support was going to General Mihailovich. But once the Germans invaded during Operation Barbarossa, once the Germans invaded the Soviet Union, we know the Soviets switched sides. And we started to see more communist resistance movements arise. One of those movements was the partisan movement in Yugoslavia under Tito. And Tito was a communist. He had a different vision for Yugoslavia after the war. General Mihailovich had hoped to reform a monarchy, a republic, a monarchy, and he was vehemently anti-communist. So they were struggling. General Mihailovich and the Yugoslav army in the homeland was struggling and fighting against Tito and his partisan forces almost as much as they were fighting against the Germans. And that made things very complex and complicated for the Allies. The United States didn't really have eyes on the ground. The OSS wasn't present yet, but the Brits had been present in the Balkans since 1940-41. They had presence in the region, and they had contact with Mihailovich and also with Tito. General Donovan, understanding that we were at a shortfall, not having good intelligence coming out of Yugoslavia, decided to send some OSS officers into Yugoslavia to coordinate with both Tito and with General Mihailovich. But up until, again, 1943, the support was going to both sides. Then things started to shift. And they started to shift once Churchill started to receive actually some rather poor information about what was actually occurring within the Balkans. You may know that the British intelligence headquarters in Cairo was infiltrated by some communists, and the Brits were having a challenge with that internally, but they were feeding back information that Mihailovich was collaborating, that many of the attacks that Mihailovich conducted against the Germans, the credit was actually given to Tito. So there was a real bit of disinformation going on. Churchill, the United States kind of was following the British lead in the Balkans and following Churchill's directive. So we started to shift after this time in 1943. We started to shift our attention and our support away from General Mihailovich as well. I mentioned that Donovan understood this situation was very, very complex, and we were a little bit behind because we didn't have eyes and ears on the ground. So the Office of Strategic Services sent in this gentleman here, George Muslin. He was an American of Serb descent, and a few Americans that were of Serb descent were recruited to do this mission. Muslin was from Pittsburgh, actually, or he was from Ohio, but he played football in Pittsburgh. I've got I want to share this with you. It's something we put together. It's about George and his
Joanne Muslin de la Riva from Leesburg, Virginia, and this is the story of my father, George Musulin. George Gov Musulin was born in New York City in 1914 to Serbian parents from Selo Musulin near Gomiria and Lika. He grew up in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and attended the University of Pittsburgh on a football scholarship. He played with the team during their national championship year of 1937. After graduating from college, he played professional American football in Pittsburgh, St. Louis, and Chicago. George was inducted into the Army in 1941 and soon joined the Office of Strategic Services, OSS, where his Serbo-Croatian language ability was needed to support Allied operations in the Balkans. The biggest challenge in George's training was parachuting. For OSS officers going into Yugoslavia, this was an essential skill. No one over 185 pounds was allowed to parachute. George was over 250 pounds. The instructors allowed him to train, and he completed parachute school, holding the record as the heaviest OSS officer to finish training. In May 1944, George was designated commanding officer of Operation Halyard, a mission to rescue American airmen who had been shot down over Serbia and were trapped behind enemy lines. These airmen of the U.S. 15th Air Force were flying missions to bomb the oil fields in Ploesti, Romania. These targets were extremely important for disrupting Hitler's war machine. The airmen were hidden and protected by the Royal Yugoslav Army in houses of local villagers who provided care for the airmen. On August 2, 1944, Lieutenant George Musolin, accompanied by his second-in-command, Michael Rajasic, and radio man Arthur Jibi Jibilian, was dropped into western Serbia near Pranjani. A few miles off target, Musolin landed on a chicken coop, twisting the Orthodox cross he wore around his neck. Rajasic landed in a tree and Jibilian into a mud bank. Together they walked into Pranjani, where they were greeted by villagers and many American airmen. Serbs gave George the name George Amerikanac. With the help of the Royal Yugoslav Army under the command of General Draža Mihailović and local villagers, work immediately began to extend the airfield near Pranjani to enable C-47 rescue planes to land and take off with the evacuated airmen. The first rescue of the Halyard mission took place on August 9th. On August 27th, George flew out of Pranjani, having completed his mission. The Halyard mission became one of the most heroic military operations of World War II, with more than 500 Allied airmen rescued from behind enemy lines. The last flight took place on December 27, 1944, from an airfield near Doboj, Bosnia-Herzegovina. Musolin was awarded the Legion of Merit for his actions and deeds in the face of extreme danger. Musolin continued with the OSS on assignments in India, Burma, and China, and was discharged from the Army in 1946 when he began working for the Office of Naval Intelligence. He was recruited by the CIA in 1950. He served as a field operations officer and was part of a team that was responsible for recruiting and training Cuban exiles to fight against the regime of Fidel Castro. He retired from the CIA in 1974. George Musolin died in 1987 and was buried in Arlington National Cemetery, along with his wife, Stefania Makiewicz, who predeceased him in 1985.
Again, this kind of gives you a little picture of the U.S. Special Operations going into Yugoslavia to try to get a understanding of what was going on the ground. General Twining, commander of 15th Air Force, understood that there were a lot of airmen missing, but we didn't have a good sense. And so again, sent Musolin in October of 43, and his responsibility was to gather intelligence, to help with special operations and resistance, and then also to gather information on the airmen. And then he returned back to Bari in May of 43. And his report back, there was an expectation maybe that there'd be 100, 150 airmen that they had gathered. But when they heard that there were 500 spread out over this wide area, General Twining and the OSS decided they needed to plan a rescue mission to extricate them. And so that's where aircrew rescue units were established, again, in conjunction, 15th Air Force and OSS. And Aircrew Rescue Unit 1 was codenamed Operation Halyard. So Muslin went back with his team to coordinate further with General Mihailovich, bring the airmen together. Again, they were spread out over a pretty significant area, and the first missions were flown in early August of 44. Keep in mind now, Operation Halyard took place from August till December of 1944, and it took place at 3 different airfields. One was Pranjani, second was Koceljevo, and the third was in what is now Bosnia-Herzegovina, Republika Srpska, Bolinic Field. And they had to, because as the Germans were retreating, the partisan were advancing, they were also retreating and collecting airmen and rescuing them. But so Operation Halyard, again, very specific from August till December. Over the course of the whole war, Serbs were responsible, both partisan and the Yugoslav army and the Chetnik forces, for close to 1,200 Americans who were rescued from that territory, from Yugoslavia. So again, you heard Muslin's daughter, who narrated that video, say that he left. He left at the end of August of 44, but the mission didn't end till December of 44. So why did he leave early? Well, he, as I mentioned, there was this shift of support. So, and it was happening as the Serbs were helping our airmen. So they had our airmen, they were protecting them, they were feeding them, bringing them to the field. Airplanes were landing, and they were landing without supplies. They were actually dropping supplies to the partisan landing, picking up our guys. So while this was happening, this shift was taking place in real time. Muslin understood, he was on the ground, he saw what was happening. He understood that Mihailovich was not collaborating, that what Mihailovich was doing to rescue our airmen and to resist. But his reports back to 15th were going unheeded, and it's a rather complex situation. Roosevelt ignored a little bit, and we still sent some supplies, but Churchill got pushed back pretty hard. And so the directive was no direct supply for General Mihailovich and the Yugoslav army in the homeland. Not only was Muslin a big guy, but he didn't really suffer fools, and he didn't like that directive, and I won't say he disobeyed orders, but he continued to support Mihailovich, who was supporting our guys. So he ended up leaving a little early, and Captain Nick Lalic, the second Serb American of Serbian descent, went into to Serbia to finish the mission. And here you see Lalic with General Mihailovich, and then this is a photo of Lalic back at Bari. This is Arthur Jabilian, he's the radio operator, and then this gentleman here at the end is George Vojinovic, and he was the third Serb of American of Serb descent, sorry, who helped plan the rescue mission. So he was, and his story, he was at the beginning of World War II. When World War II broke out in Yugoslavia, he was in Belgrade studying medicine. And his escape from Yugoslavia is just an amazing story in and of itself. But this is the OSS piece of it. Complex and still in many ways unresolved today. You still find many accounts, and if you look at it, Tito won. Tito wrote the history. The winner writes the history. Tito executed General Mihailovich in 1947. And I'm sorry, 1946. After a sham trial in 1946, Mihailovich was executed. President Truman awarded him the Legion of Merit posthumously in 1947 for the role he played, but still a lot of controversy as to telling the story. This is an important part of the conversation, how the airmen were treated, and how we know how they were treated and how we recorded this. This mission, of course, was highly secretive and kept secret for many, many years, but you see it's very, very well documented. And a lot of people asked why it's so well documented. Well, because they sent in combat photographer J.B. Allen, flew in one of the first rescue aircraft, and he stayed documenting the rescue mission. If you recall back from the first video I showed, that the C-47 landing in that grainy photo, that was actual footage from Pryany. That was a footage of a C-47 landing in 1944 in Pryany. So J.B. Allen was there, able to capture a lot of these photos we obtained at the archives in D.C. And then a lot of the airmen, believe it or not, we all have I usually have my cell phone, where it is it? But we all have our cell phones and we take photos of everything everywhere we ever go, right? Some of the airmen actually had cameras and flew with cameras as well. Gary Cole, one of the pilots of the aircraft, he has photos and they're on display at the Airborne and Special Operations Museum in North Carolina. Here's a photo. I usually like that. What's wrong with that photo? Say again? There's two things that I like to point out. Yeah, okay, so people know, right, that's a German identification. I mean, was it a joke? Were they really trying to fool somebody? My guess is maybe it was done tongue in cheek, huh? But the second thing is, where's the wing? It's not the greatest photo, but it's in a tree. So they had a little mishap, but as you know, the C-47 is a pretty rugged aircraft, so they rolled it out. The wing was bent a little, and it was able to fly out, but it was a pretty tight spot where they landed. So these next couple of photos are of the airmen as they were being collected before the rescue. And I find them interesting the more I reflected on them, because, look, this could be like at any picnic, right? This could be at any family picnic or a picnic that we go to, but it's not. I mean, it's in the middle of rural, occupied Serbia during a pretty difficult time. And I think a lot of the smiles say it, really point out something that I think is important, that the airmen were treated extremely well. Every single one that I spoke with, I mentioned that I had the honor back in 2008, 2009, we received some money through the State Department, and we came back to the U.S., and I brought those Serb producers with me, and we drove around the United States, on the East Coast mostly, New York, New Jersey, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Ohio, to meet with airmen that were actually rescued during this mission, and two of the OSS officers that were alive at the time. And to a man, every single one of them spoke, as you might imagine, with great emotion about what their rescuers, what the Serbs did to protect them and to get them home. And in recognition of that, after the war, again posthumously, President Truman, awarded General Mihailovich the Legion of Merit, which is the highest award that could be bestowed upon a foreign military officer. But it was done after he was executed. The pilots understood that this trial was going on and tried to come to his aid in a way, but were rebuffed and weren't allowed to submit any testimony. And over the years, the airmen tried to tell their story as well. And it's interesting because even as time went on, they were unable to do so. And this kind of brings us to the point, right? I mean, why have we not really heard about this story? And I think I've shared a piece of that already, right? That during the Second World War, the British intelligence was not feeding correct information about what was going on in Yugoslavia. It was an extremely complex situation, don't get me wrong. I oversimplified it maybe a little bit, but it was as much a civil war. That civil war, I mean, Churchill wanted to win the war. He did not, after the war, it's been attributed to him that an aide of his said that if we support Tito, Yugoslavia will become communist. And Churchill presumably said, well, are you going to live there? Right? I mean, he wanted the war to end. He was purely pragmatic, wanted the war to end, didn't care about the outcome necessarily. You know, there were a lot of Serbs that did. And this is some of the airmen that went back in 2000. So the award, the Legion of Merit, was held in a desk, I think in State Department, until 2006. So the year actually before I got there. This is some of the airmen. This is General Mihailovic's daughter, and they gave, so that's Arthur Jabillion and George Voinovich, two of the OSS guys, Claire Musgrove, Bob Wilson, and that's Charles Wilson. And I'm blanking, I'm sorry. But they traveled back to Serbia in 2006 to present the daughter of General Mihailovic with the Legion of Merit. So even after all those years, it was still kept quiet. And the second part of why this story has not been told, it was caught up in the geopolitics after World War II. In 1948, Tito broke hard. Even though he was communist, he was a dictator, but he broke hard with Stalin, right? Yugoslavia was not part of under the Iron Curtain, behind the Iron Curtain. It was not part of the Soviet orbit. And as a matter of fact, Yugoslavs could travel. They could work in Austria, they could travel. Economically, they were a little more free, but Tito didn't allow for any political dissension, but they were not behind the Iron Curtain. And we know that Southeast Europe was under great pressure to fall under the communists. We had issues in Greece, in Italy. There was a rise in communism. So there was a thought that we didn't want to push Tito further towards the Soviets and incur the rest of Southeast Europe becoming communist. There was even talk in the 50s, early 50s, of Tito joining NATO, of Yugoslavia joining NATO. I've read documents about this. So this got caught up in a geopolitical struggle. Mihailovic, in a way, was a tragic figure caught in this bigger picture. And so that kind of leads me to just spend 2 minutes or so talking about what we are trying to do as a foundation. And I think I've shared a little bit about that, but to continue to tell the story about what happened, what Serbs did for the Americans, and what those, what the airmen went through. And the way we've tried to do that is connect the history to the relationship today. The 80th anniversary was last year. 2024 was the 80th anniversary of the rescue mission. This was a roundtable we held in Washington, in DC. This was at the Capitol building. And this was the Serbian ambassador, 2 members of Congress, Cleaver and Tenney, are part of the Serb caucus. General Harris is the commander of the Ohio National Guard. Ohio is the state partner with Serbia. And then this was a deputy minister from the Ministry of Defense in Serbia. And we shared with an audience of about 150 folks this story about Halyard and how it's important for the relationship between the United States and Serbia today. One of the most important things, and I want to say I was smart, but I think we were very lucky to have had the opportunity to meet with those whose story we're telling. Because if we don't capture this and we don't continue to tell it, then who's going to? And then this story gets lost, unfortunately, like too many others. So these are two of the first people I met when I first showed up in 2007. Pavlija Papic, she lived literally across the street where the runway was built. She told stories of bringing water to the airmen, of seeing the bombers flying to the east, hundreds and hundreds of bombers flying. This is Dragan Vidakovic. The radio operator had the radio set up in his room. We saw that where Arthur Jabillion had the radio set up. And I was honored to be able to meet them and their families, and unfortunately they've passed. Again, capturing these stories was a highlight of what we do, and we have 100 hours of video of 12 airmen and the two OSS guys. So the goal is to do more documentaries, more short videos telling their story. And I'll share a little bit the work we do with museums. I think we could use some of their interviews as interactive of storytelling, so they could tell the story in their own words. You don't have to listen to me talk about it. One of the main things we're trying to do is to find all the families of those who, the rescued airmen, and then the families of those who rescued them, of the rescuers. And we call it Finding 500, and we've done this. This is a pretty amazing story here. So this is Gary Cole. I mentioned him. His dad, Robert Cole, was a pilot of the of B-24. This is Barbara Hudspeth. Her father, Charles Wilson, was a navigator. They were on the same plane. Same plane. They got shot down. They evaded together. They got rescued. They went home. They raised families. They had kids. They had grandkids. These two met for the first time on the field where their fathers were rescued during the 75th anniversary, which was 5 years ago. So this is, we've been very lucky to connect with many families and have had the chance to, this was last year, Steve Smith's uncle. This is a gentleman, his grandfather. This is one of the historic markers. So this is a marker in Serbia at the location where these guys met. So they're pointing to his uncle and his grandfather in a photo that was taken in 1944. So we built this kind of historic trail that you could follow the experience of the airmen from where they were shot down, some of them to where they were rescued. We were very lucky to work closely with the Serbian government, and we built a permanent memorial space on the field, on the first field in Pranjani, where the rescue mission took place. And what's that look like? Like a plane, right? Yeah. It's not an accident. We planned that. So, yeah. What this doesn't show, so this is a truck. So it kind of shows the scale. It's pretty big, and it really came out nice. But what this doesn't show is that perpendicular here off the nose is a sport airfield. So there's an airfield at the location. Again, there's an airfield at the location where the rescue mission took place. So sport aircraft fly here. Last year we had U.S. special operators and Serbs jump together for the first time, land together on the field after 80 years. So the other good thing about that is that the airports of Serbia kind of owns the space. We partner with them, so it allows for maintenance, which is really important, as you might imagine in certain places in Eastern So this is the annual, we do a commemoration ceremony third Saturday every September. This was 2 years ago. This is the president of Serbia. And the reason I show this is because, and again, he's speaking, but I want to share, I mean, you see all the US uniforms here. So we have a great cooperation with the European Command, Air Force, United States Air Forces in Europe, Special Operations Command, and they send individuals to come and commemorate this very important story each year as well. This was last year. I want to see that gentleman right there? Okay, I'm going to tell you a little story about him in just a moment. He shows up. He showed up every year. Since the first year I went there, I met him. Every year he ambles out onto the field. Every year he's there. And it wasn't until a couple years ago I learned a little bit more about his story. As I mentioned, this last year we had parachute jump, and this is him, Mr. Yankovic. He was 15 years old when the airman was shot down, and his responsibility, he was part of the resistance movement, but as a young man, his job was to guide the airmen from place to place. And he had a very specific airman that he was responsible for. It was James Alonzo Walker, the only Tuskegee airman that was shot down or rescued during this mission. There were many others, but he was the only one that was rescued. So you might imagine that this Black American stood out, right? So, I mean, he was the only Black guy in Yugoslavia probably at the time. So Mr. Yankovic took him from place to place and took care of him. When he left, when Walker left, many of the airmen gave whatever they had. They gave pens, rings, and Captain Walker gave him his boots. So he gave boots to Mr. Yankovic when he was 15 years old. Of course, he lost them. He doesn't have the boots anymore. But we found Walker's son, and James Walker's son, Kenneth Walker, came last year and gave him another pair of boots. Yeah, and they fit. And so that was a really, you can imagine, a pretty special moment. And I'm really glad we did it this year, because Mr. Yankovic just passed away in March, just a month and a half ago. So, again, good timing. Huh? And I think that speaks to the importance of doing what we're doing, right? I mean, time goes by and we put things off. We could do it next week. We could do it next month. Next time I meet you guys. But we got to do it. Talked about the historic markers already. We've got 25 markers around Serbia, and there's a lot more we could do. And it's not just about telling a story of an airplane or this, it's about telling those individual stories. Whenever we could scrape together some funding, we work with the community as well, work with the schools. We have a great rapport and great relationship with some of the schools. We help buy smart technology for the teachers so they can do their jobs better, help build some libraries and things. And it comes down to education. I mentioned that General Mihailovich was executed, right? So you might imagine that the history that was taught over the past 60, 70 years has not been favorable to Mihailovich and this story. So just one backstory. So when I first found out about this, I put together an exhibit and went around Serbia, right? So in my uniform as official representative of the United States government, I would go to schools and libraries and do a little talk about Operation Halyard, why it was important for our relationship. Every single place I went, everywhere, I got two responses. One was gratitude that an American was finally, an American in an official capacity was talking about it. But a second response, and this may be surprising, was embarrassment because so many Serbs didn't know this story. Serbs didn't even know this part of their history, right? It wasn't until a few years ago, in 2018-19, General Mihailovic his name was rehabilitated. So it's officially recognized that there were two legitimate resistance movements during the Second World War, Tito's resistance and the Royalist movement. And now in every 8th grade history book in Serbia, there's a blurb. Can you read that? Can you read Serbian? Well, take it from me. I'm not lying to you. This is about Halyard, okay? And you see the photo there I showed you. But every 8th grade history book, and there's 7 versions of it, but each one of them has a blurb, has a paragraph about Operation Halyard and General Mihailovic's role. So now 8th graders, everybody's learning about this important part of their history and our shared history. And I'm telling you this also because this is a direct result of what we did as a foundation, a direct result. I mean, we worked directly with the ministry to make this happen. And then finally, working with museums here in the United States. I think that's this is how I met you guys. I met you in Reading at the World War II weekend. It's a great venue. You know, veterans groups, museums, air museums, war museums are a great place to share this story. We're working with 15, 16 different museums around the United States, all in different levels, but to share this important story. This is the Airborne and Special Operations Museum in Fayetteville, North Carolina. They've committed. They're redoing their World War II section, and they're putting a permanent exhibit about Operation Halyard there. I mentioned some of the photos that will be incorporated in that exhibit. Very good relationship with them. And then this is in Arizona. You guys know what that is. That's a C-47. And I know you're familiar with the Commemorative Air Force. There's units, 80, 90 units around the United States, I believe. This unit in Mesa, Arizona, they fly B-17, B-25, and they fly this C-47. So that plane you're looking at, it's not only the type of aircraft that rescued the Americans. That plane, in 1944, flew in Serbia and rescued Americans. So we know, we tracked the lineage, the tail number. This plane flew in Serbia in 1944 during Operation Halyard. 2 times a year we do an event there, second Saturday in April, second Saturday in November. We bring family members there, we bring other dignitaries, and we fly and have a ceremony there. And so that's a way to keep this alive, not just have pictures hanging on the wall, but actually have conversations with and get young folks involved as well. So I think I've talked a bit, shared a little bit about the mission, why it's been repressed for so long, why it's important to remember it, and what we're trying to do to do that. I'm very happy to answer any questions, hear any comments. I'd love to hear your questions. So please. Thanks.
Okay. Outstanding presentation, wonderful organization, history is made in different parts of the Second World War, and this is definitely one that I think we all just learned a lot about. So we have some Q&A at this time. If you have some questions, please raise your hand. We'll give you the mic. Please speak clearly, and we'll get those questions answered, and that'll be the final part of our talk.
Hello, very nice. You said that this raid was secret for many years. When the pilots that were rescued and taken out, were they allowed to talk about, because they're going to ask them, how'd you get out? What happened? Were they given stories of what they had to say, or how was that kept secret?
Yeah, great question. So right after the war, they were told not to talk about it, but they formed a committee, and you know, there's obviously very important reasons not to, during wartime, not to talk about how you were rescued, right? You don't want to give up your methods and sources. But right after the war, the airmen actually formed a committee. It's got a really long title, and I'm paraphrasing. A committee to rescue Draža Mihailović. And for decades after, so right after the war, they protested and wrote to their members of Congress, to political leadership, to do something. But every decade after, I mean, I've got piles of paperwork that they wrote letters to Nixon, to Reagan, and the responses back were positive. And it wasn't until it got to State Department, and State Department kind of put the kibosh on it and say, no, it's just still too sensitive. There's too many other global issues. And so that sensitivity was what drove it more than the secrecy of the mission.
And the reason I asked is we have someone from Elizabethtown near here passed away. He had survived the Poesti raid, and the story was he was knocked out, fell, and ended up in a Romanian prison camp, and then was rescued near the end. Would that be reasonable, or would that be a story that he wasn't supposed to say how he got out?
No, I mean, Operation.
There were a lot.
No, yeah, 1,800 airmen were rescued. I think it was around August 10th or 11th, something like that, from Romania.
Okay, that's what made me ask that question.
Yeah. No, they were. Again, like I said, if you were shot down over the target, you were either killed or captured, right? If you bailed out on the way back, you either were captured again or you were rescued.
Okay.
So, I think we need a mic here. Yes, sir.
Yeah, first of all, thanks for a very informative presentation. I think we all learned a lot. Back in 1999, NATO air forces bombed Belgrade in an effort to destabilize the Milosevic regime and punish them for ethnic cleansing of Kosovar Albanians, as I recall. Milosevic famously wound up before the tribunal to punish crimes in the former Yugoslavia in The Hague, and is no longer with us. I'm just curious, you said you were there in 2007, that's shortly thereafter. Was there any residual bitterness? I was a little surprised to find out we even had a defense attaché office in Serbia. I would have thought they would have been sore about that. And we also took out the Chinese embassy at the time. It was quite a raid. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
So that's a excellent question, and actually there's residual resentment today. And that's quite honestly another reason why this is important. Because this is an important part of our shared history. And I could tell you a lot more. During the First World War, Serbs were an important ally that suffered greatly. President Wilson hung the Serbian flag at the White House, one of only 2 countries that had that honor. The French and the Serbian flag were the only 2 flags flown at the White House, right? So they were a strong ally during the Second War. 1999 was a challenging time in Yugoslavia. With the breakup of Yugoslavia. The NATO bombing caused a lot of ill will, you know. The embassy reopened in 2002, so 3 years after it reopened. The defense attaché, I think, showed back up in 2004. We were there, and then I was there like 7 to 10, like I said. And it was a positive relationship. Now, if you recall, do you recall what happened in 2008, 2009 in Yugoslavia? In Serbia, I should say. So the United States recognized Kosovo, right, in 2008, which didn't go over well in Serbia at all. And there were some protests, and our embassy was attacked. I stood outside. I'm as close to you as I was to watching our embassy on fire. Really. Right there. And never once did I feel personally threatened or attacked. Had a lot of interesting conversations, but never once. But I think that speaks really why this is important. And I shared that photo in DC, right? You had the ambassador, you had 2 members of Congress, you had General Harris talking about our past and our future. And this connects those things, you know? We could talk a lot more about this, but I think there's a realization that, you know, the 90s was a difficult time because it was a European country that was bombed by NATO. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot of controversy about that. And we need to talk through that. And again, things like this help us to talk about these more difficult things. Yeah. There's a couple more hands here, I see.
You win the race. Thank you so much for sharing about this. This mission was news to me, and as you were speaking, it really reminded me of so many stories of resistance that were suppressed during the Cold War because it didn't jive with the narrative. I kept thinking about the Poles and Monte Cassino. That was just something I kept thinking about while you were talking. I'm curious, in your adventures speaking to these veterans who were rescued in the Halyard mission, are there any stories about their interactions with their Serbian rescuers that stand out? We heard some Serbian stories, and I see you smiling, so I'm guessing the answer is yes, and I'd love to hear it.
So there's one that I love. So it was Charles Wilson. He told us this story. So he, you know, you can imagine it's a pretty traumatic experience getting shot out of the sky, right? I mean, I had an ejection seat, and so you pull a lever and you shoot out. These guys had an aircraft that may have been out of control, on fire, put on their chute and jump out of a little hole, right? Tumble. I mean, that's pretty traumatic. You know, and so here he is. He sees people running around on the ground, and he's dangling his chute. He gets to the ground, and he sees these people running towards him. And they're kind of big, and one guy has a big beard, and he doesn't know if this guy's about to kill him or what, right? So, and he told me this. This is, you know, he didn't tell him too many. He had his hand on his gun because, you know, he didn't. But when he saw they were kind of like smiling, he lightened up a little bit, and you know, they couldn't communicate very well, and they could see he was like kind of thirsty, so they gave him a canteen, and it wasn't water. But he tilted it back like it was water. And I don't know if you've ever done that. I've done that, and you know, so it was. He recalled that very fondly. You know, pretty. I don't know if you're familiar with rakia. The Serbs distill this spirit from fruit, and it could be pretty strong. So, yeah, that was one story. Man, I think back to Vojinovich's, the OSS officer, in his experience, because he was in Belgrade when the war kicked off, and then he had to leave, and it was very difficult for him as an American to go, and he connected. He was, you know, college-age guy. He had a girlfriend, and he helped her, who became his wife of 50 years, 60 years, and their story of escape, traveling from Serbia to Hungary, from Hungary to Bulgaria, from Hungary to Bulgaria on a plane next to Joseph Goebbels' wife. Yeah, when you listen to George tell that story, she was sitting next to her, and George was sitting behind, and she didn't have papers. She didn't have the correct papers, so they were sneaking out, And they landed, and the Germans were checking her papers, and she was really frightened and looked really ill. And the German was giving her a hard time. The guard was giving her a hard time. And Magda Goebbels said, "Can you see she's not feeling well? Just let her go." And that's how she made her way. And then they ended up going through Turkey, through Africa, across Africa, back to the United States, where he was recruited in Africa to become OSS officer. So.
Thank you. You can't make that up.
No.
It's like,
You can't make that up. And just think about the movies you can make about that stuff, right?
thank you.
So, yes. Wait, one more thing. Yes, sir.
I just find it incredible that all of this took place behind enemy lines. They built several airstrips. Are there any accounts of the Germans ever finding out about any of this? The German Luftwaffe would see these strips from the planes. All of these C-47s landing and taking off, I just can't believe that they didn't know this was going on.
That's an awesome question, and I get asked that almost every time. So there's a few reasons for that, right? And probably the one isn't the camouflage, the JU that they put on and the German garrison in Chachak was only 30 kilometers, 40 kilometers away, right? So they were close, but inaccessible because of the hills, but the aircraft were there. And there are stories, actually. Well, I'll tell you this. So they were gathering by the field, they were preparing the field, and they heard the drone of an aircraft, right? And it was a German spotter plane. It was a German reconnaissance plane, I guess. And it was getting close. They all dove into the bushes and into the weeds, and they thought for sure they were going to be caught. Now you got to keep in mind too that the airfield wasn't marked, right? It was a field. They were flattening it, so it wasn't necessarily so obvious, but still, they thought they were caught. And then a few cows wandered out onto the field, and the plane circled and then left, you know? So the cows maybe saved them there. But the other thing that really saved them, or why this was successful, I would argue, that it was really well planned, and that there were missions to distract the Germans, right? So you had fighter aircraft, P-51s, P-47, flying and strafing some of the airfield, strafing some of the other garrisons to detract them while the C-47s were flying in. So I would attribute probably this real success to the fact that it was well thought out and well planned.
Thank you.
Sure. Got one there, one in front too.
Another question right back here.
Okay.
Two questions. One, about how many flights were there? I mean, if you put 30 on a plane, we're talking about 20 flights going in and out. And two, in my memory, I remember seeing movies about guys going down in Yugoslavia, and the question was, who were the people who found them? You know, some were turning them over to the Germans, and some were the good guys.
Okay, two awesome questions. The first one, I really should know. I should know how many aircraft, but it wasn't 30 people because the airfields were small. They only were taking 15 at a pop. So they were only taking 12 to 15 each flight. I do know, so the first flights, there were 8, 5, and 5, and then the next morning they did a bunch more. But I have part of those right. I just don't know the exact numbers of flights. But it was a lot more than you might think because it was, and it was also broken down. So the preponderance of the airmen were rescued from Pranjani, about 250 something, and then as they were retreating, so Cappello was 80, and then the last in Bosnia, it was a lot less around December. And then the second question, refresh my memory.
I remember seeing films or movies where they said that they had people,
Yeah.
partisans turning people,
Sorry.
or with the Germans.
So I mentioned, right, Halyard was from August till December. So Operation Halyard was a very specific mission. During the course of the whole war, partisan units helped collect airmen. Other Chetnik units, just Serb civilians, collected them. There were some airmen that just spent a day on the ground. They were put on a boat, brought to the coast, put on a boat. So during the course of the whole war, over 1,200 were rescued. I have never come across any account of Serbs turning over airmen to the Germans. The Croats, it wasn't necessarily the same story. The Ustasha were sometimes more Nazi than the Nazis, and they killed Americans and they turned them over. So really depended on where you ended up landing. There were actually examples. We have a couple of examples where the partisan and the Chetniks who were fighting each other cooperated to get the airmen moving out. So both sides understood the importance of helping the Allies. So great question, thank you. I think we got one more up front. Okay.
Has there ever been a book or an article written about this? Because most of what you have told me, I heard parts of it before, and I can't associate where.
So you have an article here, right in front. There's been a few articles, yes. Around the same time, in 2008, Greg Freeman wrote a book, and it's called Forgotten 500. The book Forgotten 500. It's a really great account of this, but I knew what he knew then, and now we know so much more. But it's an excellent primer, a great introduction to this. But it just scratches the surface, and it shows how rich this story is. So Forgotten 500 is one. There's a bunch of other, and if I ever get my
Thank
act
you.
together.
That's probably where I read it before.
Yeah. Okay, up front.
I wondered if these missions were at night or during the day.
So both. The first missions were at late 1 o'clock in the morning between the 9th and the 10th of August. So they lit fires along the runway, and by all accounts those were pretty hairy landings, yeah.
No doubt.
And then there were a lot of day missions as well. It was a mix.
I also had a comment. Ironically, wasn't the wife of this couple that had escaped, wasn't the wife of this couple that escaped, I think, did she work for the government or something? And if, they were trying to get a rescue going, but until it hit her desk, it wasn't really going anywhere. And she talked to her husband, and that kind of got the ball rolling.
So there is this piece, yes. So Mirjana Vojnović, who became Mirjana Vojnović, when they got back to D.C., so they left in 1941, right? They got back to the States. She worked at the Serbian consulate, or the Serbian embassy, Yugoslav embassy in D.C., because she spoke and she was native. And she was hearing reports through Yugoslav channels that there were a lot of Americans missing. And it was corroborated by a letter she received from an American that said, we think my husband or son or whatever is in the and so she connected those dots, communicated that with her husband, who was George Vojnović, and that helped corroborate what they were seeing in Bari, right? Because they received radio calls, they were receiving, and they came up with an amazing code because they weren't sure if the Germans were trying to spoof them, and trying to trick them into sending rescue missions. So what Mariana found out helped to corroborate that, yeah, there were a lot more than they understood. It's really an amazing part of the story, yeah. All right. I could talk all night, but I know you guys don't want to hear that.
Another round of applause for Mr. Cappello and his talk.
Thank you, really.
Again, very grateful for your presentation. Thank you all for being in attendance, and our viewers online. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for the contributions we hope that you could make. Mr. Cappello has some items up here. We still have books and so on outside. I want to take a moment here and introduce Dr. Chris Huffman, who's the president of our organization. He has a few concluding remarks, and that'll be the end of our talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph, very much. And thanks, John. I want to say a few words towards the end here. John, you really demonstrated your passion tonight, and we have a small gift, a famous coffee mug.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And it does have our logo, so every morning, maybe
cool.
when you have coffee, you can be reminded of your talk here, and as a reminder of being with us tonight. Thanks, John. And thanks for coming up. He drove up from D.C. today, so a significant journey he made today. All right, guys, so we have some brochures up here, and John will talk to you at the end when you guys come up. We do want to thank him for his, I think we all learned something. Tonight. We had a lot of questions, and questions kind of show that when somebody has that many, we have that many questions, that shows your level of interest. So I think that was demonstrated tonight, and so we thank you. It's great to have you. We'll see you at the air show also in June as well. And now I need to announce real quick, Eli Razan will be our speaker for June 5th. World War II veteran. He was in the U.S. Navy 1940 to 50, and he served in both the Battle of Atlantic and the Battle of Pacific, so Pacific Theater. And he was on the USS Griffin, so that was a sub-tender, they call it. It basically looked like a cargo ship, but he was an electrician. They helped to repair U.S. subs throughout the war. And I think they also repaired a destroyer during the war and some other cargo ships as well. They were also repaired throughout the Pacific. 42 to 45, he was in the Pacific, and Battle of the Atlantic, 40 to 41, he was on a destroyer in the Atlantic. So he'll be here June 5th, World War II veteran. Then we have, I do want to say that I hope that you can, if you find that you want to, please support us in our mission. We have our helmet committee guys in the back. They've been doing this for many years, and we're thankful for that. And they will be happy to take your donations, and actually an authentic World War II helmet of all things. So that's actually something that you can take a look at the helmet too, a piece of World War II history. So thanks for being with us tonight. We also have our live audience. We want to thank them for being with us too, and all of you guys here tonight in person. And so we'll see you on June 5th, and have a good month in the meantime. And please come up front and say hi to John, and look at his historical brochures that he has, and shake his hand, and he'll be happy to talk to you. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you.